There we go, guys. October 2, it's Friday, and the Christmas tree lights are flashing. Or it's my camera, I don't know. But here it is. In a breeze mouth. Very, very nice. Hey guys, it's Friday. It's under our skin, and we're here with Sir Liner and myself. And Sir Liner is continuing his journey through his youth.
So this is, I guess, 1982, and I'm at the end of working for a Chevy dealership. I mentioned previously the owner's son, Sydney, that's at my urging, had set up and opened a electronics accessory add-on shop in back of the dealership, and made me the manager, and I'd hired a couple guys, 3 guys to work there.
So this means you could buy a car, then go out the back and you could put all these added extras into the car?
Of course, yes.
Oh, cool.
This way, not only did the dealership make more money, right? They made a profit selling you the car.
Right.
But now Sydney was adding more money to the bottom line by selling you a high-end Kenwood or Pioneer stereo system, right? Take out that rotten factory radio unit and add this high-end expensive stereo equipment, amplifier, big custom speakers, a boom box in the trunk.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Pick my ride.
Get it thumping going down the road. So that's what I was doing, and the shop was doing fairly well, and I had met this guy who had a van, a mobile van, and he was the authorized repair for GM's Delco Electronics. All their radios in the cars, which I just got through disparaging, because they break down, they have problems. And now, electronics are just starting to become a thing, right? In fact, in 1982, Chevrolet introduced the 84, they skipped the year 83, the 84 Chevy Corvette. The Corvette had a groundbreaking LCD instrument cluster, liquid crystal display.
Well, that is early, isn't it?
Yes, this was the first in a car, introducing electronics into the car. Well, of course, it being GM, Chevy,
right.
These LCD units would break down.
Okay.
Right? And they had to be repaired. And this guy in his mobile van, he would come by once, twice a week, spend a day trying to fix these things in the parking lot in his van. He had the van all set up for repair, had parts, everything else. However, he couldn't fix everything. So I would talk to him whenever he was there. He was telling me that what couldn't be repaired had to be boxed up and shipped to the authorized service repair center, which was in Omaha, which is 60 miles away. This intrigued me. I thought, now that's what I'd like to be doing. Rather than just installing the add-on electronics, why not be repairing it? That's what I want to do.
So that would mean you were actually still working for Chevrolet, but looking after or moving to a factory that was doing their electronics for Chevrolet cars.
Well, the electronics were done by Delco.
Okay.
Well, Delco, I believe, is in Indiana, where Delco would actually make the electronics that would be installed in the car on the factory line, factory assembly line.
Okay.
Right? But throughout the United States, right, you didn't want to be sending your repairs to Indiana to be fixed by Delco. You needed local repair centers to fix problems. But you couldn't put a repair center in every town. So what they would do is they'd pick a big city, set up a repair center, and then all the towns around, you had these guys in vans, mobile vans, that go around and repair what they could.
Yeah.
What couldn't be repaired would be sent to the city to the authorized repair center.
Okay.
So my thinking was, if you're going to get it really into electronics, you got to get out of installation and wiring and get into repair and servicing the actual electronics, to learn it. So my plan was, I got to get to Omaha and apply for a job at the Delco authorized service center, repair center. And it was called, at that time, Radio Engineering Service. It's now become Radio Engineering Industry, I believe. And it's much bigger. They actually manufacture their own equipment, radio equipment, transmitting equipment. So they've progressed over the years to a big assembly. At that time I was there, it was much smaller.
Okay.
Just a back.
So it's really grown and it's really taken off.
It's taken off.
Yeah. And that was the time, so at that time, that's when, was it Jobs and Wasowski came up with like
Steve Jobs, Apple, and his partner, Woj, everybody calls him Woj or Woj, Steve Wachowski. They had just invented the Apple PC, personal computer. I believe this was 78, 79.
So you really got on right at the beginning of all. Electronic technical boom.
Right. I'm trying to ride the cutting wave.
Yeah.
Right? I want to be in from the beginning. I want to get in on this. I think Bill Gates, head of Microsoft. Right?
Yeah.
Bill Gates also was around this time. He invented the operating system for personal computers. And I think...
Windows.
Yes.
Was it called Windows then?
It wasn't called Windows yet.
Oh, right.
And in fact, he didn't actually invent it. I heard he found some guy that the original inventor, he bought it from. Because the original inventor didn't know what to do with it. He didn't know how to market it. Right. Steve Jobs did, or not Jobs.
Bill Gates.
Bill Gates knew how to market an operating system for a computer, personal computer, right?
Yeah.
I think it was 81 or 82 that Jobs came out with Macintosh, the Mac.
Right.
The first commercial PC, personal computer. There's a famous advertisement on TV that Steve Jobs approved, or he designed or created. And they ran it at the 1982, I believe 82, Super Bowl, where if you're going to have a TV ad, that's what you want, right? It costs you millions, but you can't beat the audience, right?
No, you've got a great captive audience. They're not going anywhere.
Everybody's
for
watching.
5 or 6 hours.
And there's this famous commercial where Steve Jobs designed. He took the movie 1984, and the commercial was this guy with this warrior, like a Greek warrior, a Roman gladiator or something, swinging an iron ball, and there's a giant screen in the background with the 1984. Remember that movie? They made a movie out of the book.
Yeah.
George Orwell's book.
George Orwell, 1984.
Right, and there was this guy this ugly face, kind of like the Emperor in Star Wars. Anyways, he's on this big screen talking, you will obey, you will follow orders. And this guy comes out, this warrior, and he's slinging this big metal ball on a chain.
Right.
And he throws it into the screen and shatters the screen, right?
Right.
With this 1984 leader guy talking. And the deal was, right after that, it comes up, Macintosh or Mac computers, break the norm.
Okay.
Right?
Well,
it's all new. Get a personal computer.
See, that's all new to me because I wasn't in the UK in 79, 80, 81, 82. I was actually in Saudi Arabia. I remember going to an interview on a Sunday because I was a bit bored of what I was doing with my job, and I had this interview with these Arabs, and I'd never actually come across Arabs before. It's a bit intimidating in this Kensington Hilton hotel. But on the Sunday I had the interview. On the Wednesday I was flying out to Riyadh for a new experience in life. I was going to be a cook in Riyadh for the royal family and Saudi Arabian Airways, and a crazy time in my life, really.
Is that cooking's cutting edge?
No, I don't think it was cooking's cutting edge. It was all about, I was getting paid around £8 or £9 a week.
All about the money.
Yeah. I was trying to save money, so I was getting around £60 a month, and this job was offering me £660 a month. No brainer, really. My arm came out as fast as a jackrabbit running across a field. I shook on it and then flew to Saudi Arabia. And I got to Saudi Arabia. It was dry, hot, dusty. We landed at Riyadh Airport, and my first experience was I was coming off the aeroplane, and there was a TriStar. I know it now as a TriStar aeroplane on the runway. The top part had all been burnt out because it had this airplane accident where the aeroplane caught fire and they didn't react fast enough, and all 200 plus people died on the plane. It was okay when the aeroplane was flying because the engine in the tail fin, all the flames were going out the back. But as soon as it landed and stopped, the flames decided to rush up the aeroplane and engulf everybody. So yeah, that was my first experience.
You saw the wreckage of the plane on the runway?
Wreckage was left on the runway. It was on the runway for about 4 or 5 years.
Really?
Nobody wanted to turn around and do anything with it.
Not very good advertising.
No, people would turn around and saying, well, what happens to the flight investigators and what happens to the international investigation team? Well, when you worked in Saudi Arabia at that time, it was all about the royal family and the king. He was the rule. Whatever he said went. Didn't matter about international. Nobody went there. So I arrived on a Thursday, and Friday was the Sunday. So everything was closed on the Friday because that was their Sabbath.
Kind of like Manila, right? The Nino Aquino International Airport. You know how there's actually 4 terminals, right?
Yeah.
Terminal 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you have to take a shuttle from each terminal.
Right.
And if you take that shuttle, which is basically a bus, you drive to get to these other terminals. You're driving across the runways, the tarmac. You're driving around behind some of the actual airport. But at one point, you'll drive by the old original, from back, who knows how long ago, right? late 40s or
Right,
50s.
okay. The first international airport.
Yes, in Manila. And they have parked there, and you could see it from the bus, some of the old original planes, all propeller, of course. They have an old rusted DC-3,
Oh,
Douglas
yeah.
Corporation, DC, very famous aircraft, twin propeller. But this thing's been sitting there since probably 1950, right?
That's the thing they used to jump out of in the Second World War, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was called, then it was called the C-47, the military version.
Yeah.
Right? But they have an old rusted DC-3 sitting there. I mean, it's obviously been there a long, long, long time. And then I think there's another couple other aircraft sitting there, all rusting out. And I'm thinking, why do they have these aircraft sitting there at an international airport? It's not very good advertising, right?
They had this airport in Riyadh. I turned around and stayed there for all the time I was there. And you look at it and you think, a bit like you're saying, why? Why don't you just get rid of it?
Yeah,
but
it's an eyesore.
Yeah, but when I flew out in '79, there wasn't a lot of tourism going into Riyadh. It was a very hard lockdown. I remember going to work on the Saturday morning, because Friday I was off, and I went to work on the Saturday morning at the local, and they were going to do this induction, walk me around and talk to me. And they walked me around and they talked to me and they showed me this air flight kitchen that was going to be supplying international flight food. And my brief was to bring European standards to Riyadh. And I walked around this kitchen this day and I was absolutely shocked. They actually had cats living underneath the tables up in the rafters of this kitchen, and it was serving first class economy and domestic flight food to Saudi Arabian Airways. And the place must have had like 200 cats running around this place, and it stank, absolutely stank of cat pee and cat poop.
So these cats never went outside?
I never went outside because they were catching the rats.
Oh.
Because the place was full of rats, because it was full of food, and it was about 25, 30 years old, this place. It was an old hangar that had just developed. They did build a new kitchen, but I didn't get into that kitchen for about another 9 months, and that's a whole other story about how they cut the head off a goat and then skinned it and put it into a boiler and turned it into Rempha capsa and goat, and everybody sat around on this mat and on this carpet and everybody ate it, and I remember having these, I thought they were olives, and I really like these olives. They were
not
black.
olives.
They weren't olives, no, they were sheep's eyeballs.
Oh.
These things were popping in my mouth and I was going, these are really, really nice. And it was only when I went to the toilet I found that all the blood that was in the eyeball was sticking to my gums and my teeth, and my gums and teeth were black.
A delicacy.
Yeah, it was a delicacy, but it was something, now when people turn and say they're olives, I turn around and make sure I cut them in half to make sure they don't explode in my mouth. They don't pop and all the blood goes everywhere. But they tasted really nice with the rice, with the mince lamb, but it's quite difficult because you weren't allowed bacon, and that's when I first came across this thing called turkey bacon. It came from Turkey, but it was smoked, so they called it turkey bacon. Why would you name something named after a bird that's made from pig? And you're in a religious country that does not eat, Muslims don't eat pork, you're advertising turkey bacon.
Well, maybe that's it, right?
Yeah.
If they called it turkey, then Muslim people would think, oh, it must be from a turkey, not pork, not from a pig.
Yeah, they should have called it turkey rasher or something like that. That's what I think. But anyway, that's just my personal view. So I was there for 2 years, and I met a couple of Brits, a guy called Steve, a guy called Chris. Got on very, very well. Great kitchen, the food. We started moving the food forward because we started moving forward regarding fresh fruit being used on the flights rather than tinned fruit. The omelettes that were being used for breakfast, they were fresh omelettes rather than buying in these frozen German omelettes, and then we turned around and started doing different types of international food on the international flights instead of just Saudi food. So if you flew to London or New York out of Riyadh, predominantly it was 99% Arabic food, and not everybody wants to eat Arab food when they're flying back to New York or London or San Francisco or Hong Kong.
So this was being delivered to Arab airliners, right?
Yeah, Saudi Arabian Airways.
Yeah.
And the whole kitchen was Saudi Arabian Airways. It had no other customer, because flights that flew into Riyadh all had to buy their food from Abu Jaydal catering, and it was the only flight catering operation in Riyadh, and it was owned by Saudi Arabian Airways. I remember British Airways used to fly in. There was no alcohol, there was no pork, there was no nudity, there was no any bit of naked flesh would all be confiscated at the airports. It was quite hard, but I wasn't there to turn around and become part of the culture. I was there I got one day off a week, which was a Friday, because that was a religious day, and it was go out, start moving the food forward. But I got £660 a month, and I remember sending my second month's salary, because I didn't get paid on the first month. The second month, and you get a bit worried because you haven't been paid and you're living on eat at work, drive home and stuff like that. But I found it quite difficult, and then when I did send my money and I wired my money home using Western Union, my mum and dad thought I was doing drugs or I was doing something illegal like gambling, because I sent back around about £3,000 because of my bonuses and everything else, and that was a lot more. That was, heaps of money for the late 70s going into the 80s. You
had a plan though. You were saving this money. Right?
Yeah, I was saving the money to come back and buy a property and get on the property ladder in the UK. I couldn't do it in the UK on £9 a week. So £9 a week, you can spend that now in a McDonald's, just on one meal. Then it was a lot of money. I left my MG car back at my mum's house, up in the garden, and I flew out. My mum was gutted and devastated. My father was, he's flown the nest. That's one less person I've got to feed in the house, and you go from there. And yeah, it was a way of expanding my catering knowledge, and as I said, it went on for 2.5 years. After my first year, I had my accommodation was paid for, I had a car that took me to work. It was a Caprice Classic. I always remember it was in brown.
Chevy Caprice?
Yeah, I think so.
Really?
Very boxy,
big car.
Oh god, it was huge, man. It was it was the first time I'd actually come across what's known as sleeping policemen. I went down this boulevard called Satine Street in Riyadh, and this thing had you've got to remember, back in the UK, the engine in my MG was about the size of a hand blender, and I got this car in Saudi Arabia, and the engine was about the size of a condominium. It was it was huge,
big V8.
Yeah, and when I put my foot on it, I could be doing 100 kilometers an hour like instantly, and that was mega. However, I hit one of these sleeping policemen, and the front wheels ended up in the back, and the car just ground to a halt on this road.
What's a sleeping policeman? An actual cop sleeping?
Oh no, that's those concrete ramps in the road that slow you down. You know, the bumps you get in the road.
Speed bumps.
Speed bumps. We used to call those sleeping policemen, because they were invisible policemen that used to turn around and slow you down.
Yeah.
But in Saudi Arabia, these used to be like 18 inches to 2 foot high. So they were like hitting a wall.
Oh, that's bigger than an average speed bump.
Yeah, and you used to have to go up to these things and creep over the top to make sure you had ground clearance.
And you drove over one at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, I didn't even see it. I didn't even see this thing. And the front wheels ended up the back. And it used to have four headlights, 2 each side in like little squares, like shoe boxes. And that fell off as well. So you had the radiator, but the lights are on the floor. The police came. They took the car away. Next day, they turned around and said, "Oh, your car's outside in the car park." I went outside, and they repaired it, and the car was there. So, lesson learned. I drove at around about 40 kilometres an hour around Riyadh then. But I never had to show my driving licence. I don't know whether I had insurance. I don't know. I never knew how it actually worked. I just got in the car because I was young, foolish, and living overseas, and off I went.
Yeah, what the hell?
That was it. Chris, who was a guy from Swindon, he got himself a black Trans Am Firebird.
Ah, Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah, he had that as his car, and Steve, the other guy, for unknown reasons, he got himself a van, a white Dodge van. And I never understood that because you only had one seat in the front and then the rest of it was a rattly old van in the back.
It was a cargo van.
Yeah, and we could never understand because we could never go out in his car. We used to have to go out in mine or Chris's to go out at night.
You know, those cargo vans, actually the Dodge Tradesman, it was called.
Right.
Those things were popular in the U.S. for conversion. They were called conversion vans. And people would buy a cargo van, like you're describing, and they would turn it into a custom, they'd put benches or beds, they'd panel the walls, put curtains. They'd turn it into like a little mini motorhome or a mini place you could live in and sleep in and
so
go camping.
Like an RV.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
And it became very popular, the what were called conversion vans.
Right.
But it started out with people doing it themselves, and then of course it didn't take long for the car manufacturers, whether it was Dodge, GM, Ford, to start making their own conversion vans.
Okay. Yeah.
Which were actually pretty nice. You could buy they'd extend the roof up so that you could stand up in them.
Okay, yeah.
They'd put sinks in them. They'd put a refrigerator.
It's a bit like a Volkswagen Combi van.
Oh, much better than that.
Yeah.
But that's the idea.
All right.
And the Dodge Tradesman was although actually it was the worst because it was a Dodge. It was the most popular for its looks.
Yeah.
Everybody liked the way it looked. So it became a very popular conversion van.
All right. Well, I was out there. Steve had his. Chris had his Trans Am, and then I was asked then if I would want to move to Dhahran after about 11 months. And Dhahran is on the other side of Saudi Arabia, and I took a train from Riyadh over to Dhahran. And there was one train a week that used to travel that way, and you didn't have first class. You just turned around and had tourist, well, I call it tourist class. It was just the basic class. It was wooden seats, and you slept on the wooden seat overnight. No AC. It was bloody hot. Worst decision I ever made in my life, I think, through that journey, because I didn't take enough water. There was no food on board, and the train did not stop. You just got on it and it got to Dhahran, and it was like 18-20 hour journey. Just keep going. It would pull over and there would be people selling stuff, and you would buy water, but it wasn't water like you get in a bottle. It was soda can bottles, and I always remember having this. It's the first time I drank this Diet Coke thing called Tab.
I remember Tab.
Silver can with red writing on it, and it had Tab written on it. tasted like Coca-Cola, and I found out later it was made by Coca-Cola, but they manufactured it called Tab. And I had about 10 of those before I actually got into Dhahran, and somebody picked me up from the railway station and took me to my accommodation. And then I worked in Dhahran, and Dhahran had a beach, which was great. I thought it was less strict. Still, you had to wear clothes. You had to dress accordingly. There was a dress code when you went out.
Was still Muslim.
Oh, huge. The biggest employer in Dhahran was Aramco, American Oil Company.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge, and wherever you went, hundreds and hundreds of Americans, but you could actually see that you weren't allowed to drink, you couldn't do this. There was a beach there called Blue something Bay outside Dhahran, and everybody went there on a Sunday or a Saturday on their days off. You went swimming in the Gulf, come back. I had a Toyota Celica then, and everybody had big 4x4s. I was given a Toyota Celica, and then I parked it, but I couldn't go down the beach like the 4x4s because it would sink in the sand. So I parked it, and then I had to walk about 1 kilometre to go to the beach, where there was an invisible fence with these little bollards, and you got to the other side and you could take your top off and you could get into a bathing costume, but the other side you had to hide your body and you weren't allowed to have your body out. A big experience for me, but after 2.5 years I'd had enough. I sent back a lot of money, and in Saudi at that time you had to surrender your passport and you had to get your Saudi employer to get a visa. So I wanted to turn around and come back to the UK, but my employer wouldn't let me come back to the UK. Even though my contract was for 2 years, I was 6 months over my contract length and I'd applied to exit. Anyway, the security guy from Saudi Arabian Airways in Riyadh came over to Dhahran, and they wanted me to go to Bahrain because one of the owners of Abu Jaidi al-Jadal was going to Bahrain to do an expo, and he wanted some of the airline food put together in Bahrain. So they wanted me to go over there to be the foreign face or the British face of Saudi Arabian Airways, and there was the Arab contingent as well. So I went to Bahrain, and this security guy, a guy called Mukbil, told me to go to the airport. And when I went to Bahrain airport, I had my passport with an exit visa, and this is my chance to come back to the UK. So I went to the British Airways desk, and there was a promotion going over on the left-hand side, and I'd asked about a flight back to the UK, and there was one in about another 2 hours' time.
Did you have your passport?
They gave me my passport because they weren't allowed to hold the passport when you were travelling. It had to be with the person that was travelling. So I had my passport. It had an exit visa, but I didn't need an exit visa in Bahrain. I had an entry visa to go back to Saudi, back to Dhahran, but I didn't need an exit visa in Bahrain. Anyway, Mukbil turned up. We had some food, and then to the left there was a woman, and she went into labour in the concourse, and all the Arabs got around and then started to try and get this woman put away and protect her dignity while she was giving birth. I then turned around and went to British Airways, got myself my ticket, walked through customs, got into the international terminal, went down, I always remember it, went to gate 36. The lady there looks at me and she goes, "Oh, hello, Mr. Kneale, how are you? Late arrival?" And I turned and said, "Oh yeah, very late." I said, "This is it." She stamped my passport, and I walked down the gangway and got onto this DC-10. I think it was a DC-10 that was flying back to London Heathrow. And I got on the plane and I sat down, and I was the only one on the plane.
So that's your crazy escape
Yeah, my crazy escape out of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And I was really worried that I was going to get caught, put into prison, because when I first arrived in Saudi, I was at Riyadh airport, and they don't have prisons. They just dig a hole in the ground because it's rock, and they put you in the hole in the ground with like a 2-ton metal railing on top of it, and they leave you in the ground. And that was my first impression of a jail or being kept captive in Saudi Arabia. They treat you as though you're inhuman.
That's a good reason to escape.
Yeah. So I got on this DC-10, and the aeroplane started to taxi. But once the aeroplane was in the air, I relaxed, and the lady turned around, or the air hostess turned around and said, "Look, we're tired. Keep walking down the back to offer you drinks and do your food. Can you come up to first class?" So I went up to first class, and there was like a little mini party going on in first class with the 13 stewardesses and air hostesses, and consequently I arrived at Heathrow Airport 12 and a half hours later, and I needed to relax at the airport because I could hardly walk. I could hardly see because I drunk maybe 4 or 5 bottles of Jack Daniels on a return, and God Almighty, did I have a bad head.
Sounds like a movie. You know?
It was
Midnight Express.
Yeah, I had to go and find a car hire, but I arrived at about 5:30 in the morning, and I didn't get the car hire sorted out until 2 o'clock, because that was when security were like, "Why am I sleeping in your arrivals lounge? I need to go through customs and get out of arrivals lounge." So yeah.
But now your plan worked, though. I mean, you had money in the bank now, right?
Yeah, I had money in the bank. I got home to my parents, and my mum was really elated to see me. She was really happy. My mum, I didn't have a bank account, so I used to mail or Western Unionize my money every time I got paid. One of the scary bits in the Saudi was they'd pay you cash, and they would just turn around and put this wad of money on the table in front of everybody, so everybody knew that you were getting a lot of money. So the people that were there from the Philippines or from Bangladesh or from India or these other countries that weren't being paid as well, that were getting paid maybe $1 a day, they were like, "Oh my God, look at all that money." And so there was this like effect, or this fear factor, that you could get robbed before you got back to your apartment. So as soon as you got paid, and all the Brits did it, you went straight down to Western Union and you got rid of the money out of the country, so it didn't get stopped. So I was sending this money back to my mum into her account, because she had an HSBC account, which used to be Midlands Bank, which she didn't use, and the money went in there.
Yeah.
But my mum paid off her mortgage, which was good, and then I got back, and my mind, I earned this money, and I was like, okay, I'm thinking Ferrari, I'm thinking sports car, I'm thinking anything but. And anyway, one day we went down into the Carfax, and there's a road going down into the Carfax called Park Street, and it's opposite the Bell Pub. And I don't know whether the Bell Pub is still there now. My mum and dad were driving, and I was in the back, and we're going out for something to eat. And my mum points at the house, and she's like, "What do you like? Do you like that house there, Gary?" And I was like, "Yeah, it looks all right, Mum, no problems at all. But a 308 GTB Ferrari is a lot better." I've just seen Magnum Force for the first time, because TV in Saudi Arabia was garbage. You got loads of cartoons, but very little thing else. And my dad turned around, nonchalantly driving, and turned around and said, "Well, you own it. We just bought it for you." So that was my leg up onto the property ladder. So my Ferrari and my high-speed sports car,
And your Tom Selleck looks.
yeah, vanished. So where you had your American muscle car ripping the arse out of the wheels up the road when you were younger, I did that in Saudi and wrecked the car, and I was looking forward to doing it on roads I knew, and it never happened.
But this worked out well for you because you had money in the bank, you had a house.
Yeah.
Me, I had nothing.
Oh.
But I still had a plan.
There you go.
I think I'm on the cutting edge of electronics. So I actually packed everything up, quit working for Chevrolet, moved to Omaha because my plan was to go to work for RES, or REI as it is now.
Okay.
And I was staying with a friend of mine. He had actually bought a house. He was living in a suburb called Ralston. And initially I took a job at a gas station, which was right up the street, so I could walk to work. But it didn't pay nothing, right?
Is that because you sold your Pontiac?
Yeah, the Pontiac was long gone.
Okay.
I was driving, at that time, I don't remember what I was. No more muscle cars.
Was it a Nissan pickup truck?
Yeah, I think I was still driving the Nissan, the blue Nissan pickup.
So you hadn't sold everything.
No.
That was good.
The pickup's good though because you can load up the back of it and move your stuff, right?
Right.
So here I am, and I got a call from radio engineering. You're hired as a bench technician. I said, great, fantastic. So I go down there and I start working for them. The pay was okay, not great, not what I expected, but not bad. And actually it was a pretty good job, good place to work.
Right.
We had a guy, another bench tech like me. His name was Tom. I don't remember his last name, but Tom was a very funny guy, and he would keep things interesting, telling jokes. But one thing Tom did that was really good was he could moonwalk.
Oh, right.
Like Michael Jackson.
Okay. Was he as good as Michael Jackson?
Damn near. I mean, this guy was pretty good. And he'd break up the monotony of work. You'd see him moonwalking across the shop floor.
Backwards,
doing that slide. You know, I don't know how you do that. I guess he taught himself how to do it. Maybe, I don't know. But he was actually pretty good, and he'd break everybody up. And in fact, it got to the point where every other day somebody would say, "Hey, Tom, do the moonwalk."
Okay, right.
And you'd see him sliding across the shop floor backwards, doing this moonwalk, and it broke everybody up. But this was, I don't know why, but business got slow. And within a year, being first or last hired, I was first fired. Or laid off, actually.
Oh, right. Last in, first out.
Yes.
Okay.
I was laid off. They said, oh, it's just until business picks back up. Well, I quickly went down to the state unemployment office and filed to collect unemployment compensation.
Okay.
Right? And they did. They gave it to me. So I went back to working part-time at the gas station, because you could only work part-time on unemployment compensation. They wouldn't allow you to work full-time if you're going to collect it. So I'm collecting unemployment during the day. I'm working nights, sitting in a little booth at a self-serve gas station. And one day, the unemployment office calls me up and says, "Hey, we got a deal for you. There's a new program called JEPTA, Job Training Partnership Act, by the federal government, where to encourage people on unemployment to get jobs, they have a school, several schools, as part of the program, and you get to go free. And we'll train you, and you get to still collect your unemployment."
No, that's a win-win.
I thought, fantastic. What a break. Right? I collect free unemployment, and I go to school for training for free. And the school I picked was digital electronics. This This was being taught by CDC, Controlled Data Corporation.
Right.
Which, if people don't know, they're no longer, they got bought out back in the 90s, they're no longer in business. But at that time, they made mainframe computers. You know, Cray supercomputers. CDC made mainframe, these room-sized supercomputers that are designed to crunch massive amounts of information. Problem is, hardly anybody was trained in computers. So they had decided to set up a school called Controlled Data Institute to train people in computers, how to work on them, service them, program them. Because there were no schools at that time in computers. So anyways, I enrolled in this school. My old job actually fought my enrollment. They suddenly wanted to hire me back because they would have to pay a percentage of the school.
Oh, right.
That's the deal with unemployment.
So if you get made unemployment in the UK, that doesn't actually happen. You get made unemployed, the government picks up your payment benefit.
No. In the US, the government comes back on the employer and says, you're going to pay a percentage of his unemployment compensation until you hire him back.
Yeah.
Right? Well, then they found out I was in this school. There's
Definitely.
no way we're going to hire him back, right? He's going to stay. It's a better deal to go to school for free and continue to collect unemployment on our dime.
Yeah.
So they took it to court. They fought it. Well, I didn't have to go to court. The state government went to court for me. And of course, you're not going to win against the government.
Well.
Nah, they lost. So I continued on in the school. It was basically teaching military, all the military electronics, because everything's developed for the military first. So all the training manuals for computers, how to work on them, everything was copied from military manuals.
Right, okay.
And you have to start out with learning algebra, because all electronic theory is all based on algebra. So now most people don't do well in math in school, right? Yeah. And I, just like everybody else, I didn't do well in algebra. Well, now I had to do well, right? Because you're tested every week on theory, and then eventually this is going to lead into watts and ohms and volts and all of that, because that's all based on algebra. So I had to crash course and relearn algebra real quick. But my plan was working, right? Here I go for 1 year, and I graduate being certified in digital electronics.
Okay, right.
And part of the just prior to graduation, part of the school was called resume training. And they would actually teach you how to do a perfect resume.
Oh, That's
and
good.
you would tailor it to the exact job you wanted, everything, how to do a perfect resume. And then they would help you in the job search. Now, initially they wanted, or they thought, people would be hired local, right?
Right.
But there's no computer industry. It's barely started, right?
Yeah.
And plus the school gets a bonus payment from the government for every student they place in a job. So the school's motivated to help you get a job in
Right.
electronics. Didn't take long for me to figure out I had to get someplace where there was computers.
Okay.
Companies using computers, companies using computer software, etc., etc. Well, I found out,
You didn't write to Bill Gates, did you?
no.
Oh, okay.
Bill Gates was barely older than me,
Oh.
right? He had just barely started Microsoft. However, he was hard at it, developing the first computer interface, and it was called MS-DOS. MS stood for Microsoft. DOS, D-O-S, stood for Disk Operating System. Remember floppy disk?
Floppy disk.
Yes, that's where.
3.5.
Yep.
Yeah.
It all started with floppy disks. And Bill Gates was a smart guy. He took this interface or operating system that he'd bought from some guy, some unknown guy, and he created Microsoft. And he started selling MS-DOS and getting people to make PCs, personal computer. IBM was one of the first,
Right.
besides Apple.
Yeah.
IBM came out with a PC. They went to Bill Gates at Microsoft and said, we need an interface, an operating system for people to learn how to use a PC, personal computer. And Bill Gates said, have I got a deal for you? I've got MS-DOS, which leads to the story of Windows operating system.
Okay, yeah.
After MS-DOS became Windows 3.1, that turned into what? Windows 95, I believe, later.
So, whatever, yeah, 95, 97.
98, 2000, or ME, millennial.
Yeah. Then,
on and on and on and on.
Yeah, and then global domination and the richest man in the world.
Yes, exactly.
I bet you the guy he bought the floppy disk
I wish,
idea of.
you know what? I wish Bill Gates had approached me to work for Microsoft. Yeah, that'd have been great. But as it was, in my I'm job searching, and I find out most of the business is being done by the Defense Department, the military.
Oh.
They want computers in jet fighters. They want computers in tanks. They want computers wherever they can put them.
Yeah.
Right? Right now, the PC industry hasn't taken off. It's just infant in its infancy. So, that meant you had to get a job with a defense contractor. Somebody that already had a contract with the Defense Department to put computers and to use computers in their equipment or with the soldiers, right?
Yeah.
So I found out Southern California was where there were a lot of defense contractors. This was probably Southern California, specifically San Diego, had the initial or the very first Silicon Valley, because they had these contractors that had set up factories to do all this. And I applied and was hired by, and plus my brother was living in San Diego at the time, and he encouraged me to come there.
Right.
So I did. I flew out one day, San Diego.
So how far is this from where you were?
Omaha's the middle of the country. San Diego's way over on the west coast, right? California. So I got on a plane, flew 1,500 miles, spent several days just going around North San Diego, or what was called North County.
Yeah.
Applying to all these different companies that I had researched, and I got hired by one. And it was called ELC, Eaton Leonard Corporation. So I went back to Omaha, packed up all my stuff, moved 1,500 miles in a U-Haul truck, and settled down in Oceanside, California, which was probably the cheapest. Because Southern California is very expensive. Oceanside was the cheapest probably, and it was fairly close to Eaton Leonard Corporation. Turns out Eaton Leonard Corporation hired me as an electronics technician, and they were manufacturing automated pipe bending machinery, and they would install computers in these, and they were built into like a desk, a giant desk.
Right.
And you had this computer mounted in the desk. An operator would come and type in and program the computer to tell this mechanical arm or this automated machine how to bend and make specific pipes, tubing, and this would all go into military vehicles.
Okay.
Right? It would go into tanks, armored personnel carriers, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And they had a contract with the military for these machines, to make these automated machines. Maybe, I think at the time it was 12 months was the contract.
Yeah.
They were supposed to produce X amount of machines over 12 months. And that's where I'm going to end the story.
Okay.
Next week, California, Southern California, and my journey through the high-tech Southern California companies, because
Right.
I worked for several of them.
Okay.